Okay, GW, you win. This is my Warlord Titan. It's a model made by Games Workshop for use in the tabletop version of Warhammer 40k. It is also comically large. Not only physically, it weighs about 15 kilograms and stands about 55, 60 centimeters tall, even without the stupid banners that I put on top of it. But even lore-wise and in-game, this is the largest, most formidable war machine that the forces of mankind can bring to bear on the battlefields of the 41st millennium. It absolutely dwarfs most of the other models in the game, even stuff that is pretty big by comparison. It also cost me close to £2,000 to buy it and all the other little ancillary things that I needed to actually put the thing together. And that process also took me a couple of years. Now, I am not complaining about that at all. I made a pretty good video series out of it, which ended almost 2 years ago to the day. No, I'm not complaining at all, actually. What I'm doing, in fact, I think is surrendering. Because, now bear with me, I made the stupid assumption that by buying the biggest model in the figurative world of Warhammer and also the literal Warhammer world, it might be pretty good in the game. And spoilers, it's not. Last year I made a video about how it's basically unplayable at its current points value. If you're not familiar, that basically means how large and powerful a force you field in the game is. Most games of 40k are fought around the 1500 to 2000 points level per side, and the Warlord Titan on its own is 3500 points. So you'd think that maybe, just on its own, it might have the firepower and staying power to deal with maybe 2 reasonably sized armies combined, just facing off against this. And you'd be wrong. Dead wrong, in fact. I played a few test games against single 2000 point armies, so essentially dropping the Titan's point value over 40% from 3500 to 2000, and it still lost every single game. I even filmed one of them for a battle report against my friend Steve's immaculately painted Imperial Knight army, and the Warlord Titan got annihilated by turn 3 at 2000 points. If it was facing a 3,500 point army, truthfully, I'm not sure it would have even seen turn 2. So what am I going to do with this thing? Sell it? Keep it as a fancy decoration for the backdrop of a live stream? Chuck it off a bridge? No. I'm going to buy more weapons for it and give Games Workshop more money and hope that that makes it better in the game. So way back when I asked my Patreon supporters what weapons we should go for, the Titan's rules were a bit more fun, flavorful at least, and the Apocalypse missile launchers looked ridiculously good for what was 8th edition 40k back then. But now in 10th edition, they are not quite so fun. Very underwhelming, in fact. While they might be useful for weakening or clearing the odd squad of infantry as you stride up the board, they're really underpowered against anything resembling a vehicle. So for another £150, you know, even more than the biggest 40k starter set that contains 2 armies, I'm gonna buy 2 more guns for my useless toy robot. Specifically, I'm buying the laser blasters, the Carapace laser blasters. They got some fun fluff text too.
Triple-barreled las blasters mounted on the Warlord's upper carapace constitute the Battle Titan's most common secondary armament. Powerful energy weapons designed to destroy entire squadrons of armored vehicles in a single blazing volley.
And yeah, that's no exaggeration either. In the current rules, each blaster can individually take out a rhino, no problem at all. Or if their power is combined, you can destroy something super tough like a Land Raider. So let's get these beauties built up and painted to match my Titan, and then hopefully I'll be able to challenge Steve to a rematch and see if I can beat him this time. Or at least last longer than turn 3. First off, let's just double check everything's in the box. My Sun Fury weapon was missing a structural part that stopped me from building it ages ago, but it looks like everything is present and correct. Good job, KF, you legend. Given that you work for Games Workshop, I can only assume that that stands for Cantor Firestorm. What a cool name, well done. Snippy, snippy, snippy. These little bits can be taken off with the snips, but some of the bigger gates will need to be hacked off with a razor saw. Now just remember to wear a mask if you're making loads of resin dust. You don't want to be breathing this stuff in. Unless... This is actually really, really nicely cast. Way, way cleaner than the gargantuan squig-off they made a few months ago. No bubbles, no warping, and hardly a mold line in sight. Let's do the traditional arbitrary OCD product to weight ratio. 655 grams of product versus 204 grams of waste. So 31% of the box contents going in the bin. Not the worst, but not great either. Cleanup was pretty simple. The few visible mold lines are mostly in places that will be covered in armor plates or hidden internally, but the few rough areas that will be visible on the outside got a little knife scrape or a sponge file smoothing depending on their shape. The only really annoying part was this little seam that runs around the heatsink, and each bit needs to be carefully sliced away, and there's flash under it too, which needs to be carefully sliced out of the gaps. One side was tedious enough, but it's the same on both sides, and there's two of them, so super fun. Let's get rid of this dust, and then we can start cleaning the mold release off the models to make sure our paint and glue stick properly. Bath in warm, soapy water, scrub, scrub, scrub with a toothbrush, and then, before they properly dry, I'm going to start gluing everything together now. The moisture definitely helps super glue, or CA glue, along. I scored little grooves in the contact points to give the glue something to grab to, and then just stuck the parts together following the instructions. Nothing on these laser blasters is load-bearing or particularly heavy, so superglue will do the job absolutely fine. There's a little gap where the heatsink sits on the body, but really I'm not going to bother mixing up putty to gap fill that because it's totally hidden by the armor panel. The only tricky part is going to be getting the weapons to sit absolutely level with each other. I cut and glued the supporting piston parts so they're exactly the same height, glued the main contact point, let it quickly rest on the supporting piston, and then pulled the pistons away to glue them in place. A little bit of a tricky procedure, but yeah, it worked out well. Both are perfectly symmetrical. Wow, like 1mm out, but I mean, that's close enough for eyeballing it. Just, don't ask me to build you a house. Time to attach the little power cable things. Love the 40k logic of having what looks like pretty important hydraulic or power cables just exposed on the outside of an incredibly heavily armored thing. Like, they could have easily run that up the inside of the armor panel for some extra protection, but hey, Mechanicum knows best. I'm going to leave the armor panels off for easier painting though, and for priming, I'm going to use black for the armor panels and brown for the understructure, same as with the rest of my Titan. The process for the understructure is so simple, it's hard to forget really. Chocolatey brown base coat, heavy gunmetal dry brush, texture sponging of some bright silver, and then an all-over murky brown wash. I'm going to use my DIY dip wash that's been going for, well, about 5 years now, but Agrax Earthshade or something similar would be absolutely fine. The armor panel method escapes me though. To be fair, it's been about 2 years since I painted one, so I gave myself a little refresher by watching my own videos, like an absolute loser, and then started laying it all down. A few layers of very diluted grey sponging, heavier towards the top, Basilicanum grey sponging across the middle of the panel, black Templar towards the bottom, a soft white dry brush to catch the rivets and stuff, and then it's time for the tediously long process of double coating thin Baharoth blue, aka Midwinter Minis blue, to all of the trim. Yeah, honestly, one coat isn't enough. That's patchier than roads in the UK at the moment. Well, my flat tyres might disagree, but after a second coat, it's not that bad. A mix of Baharoth blue and white and a careful sponge texture build-up around the edges. And then it's time for a colour filtering with Aethermatic blue. Not really caring if this goes on the black too, because honestly, the more colour the better. And now another filter with a mix of Drakenhof Nightshade and Druchii Violet sponged on with the wet side and then dabbed off with the dry side of the sponge to keep it quite subtle. Some manual grey fixing on the areas that accidentally sponge light blue on the armor panels, and then a few light blue careful brush highlights on the trim, and we're almost done with the paint. Some dirty down rust slopped on, particularly focusing on parts where water might accumulate, streaking it down to make it look realistic. And then once that was dry, I wet a cotton bud and smoothed it out, softening some of the hard edges to make it extra authentic. And just to add a little spot of colour, I'm going to give the cables a little coat of red contrast paint and then mix in some white to sketch on a kind of ribbed pattern. And I'm also going to black out the inside of the barrels too. And yeah, time to stick. Nice. Now, these look like they're going to be super front heavy and likely to sag on the model, and yeah, they absolutely do. No worries though, I'm going to magnetize them just like the missile launchers, but the only problem is I don't have any of the smaller magnets left, just the big boy ones, but they still fit in the recess of the shoulder mount, so that shouldn't be a problem. I'll just need to use this big Forstner drill bit to take a few millimeters off the bottom of this so it doesn't stick out too much. Health and safety who? Sticky, sticky, sticky. Awesome. Also, I reckon we've got space for a couple more Patreon name banners, so I went through the list of people who have joined and stuck around in the 2 years since the last set of banners were made, and immortalized another 100 or so names on the Titan's new weapons, cutting them out with a blade, giving them a light coat of sepia ink through the airbrush and grey on the back, glued them in place on the underside of the armor panel, and then singed the edges a little for that authentic battle-worn look. Here we go, upgrade time. Beep boop beep boop. Goodbye, so-called apocalypse missile launchers. And hello, big-ass shoulder lasers. Oh. They're a little bit floppy. I actually think they're so front-heavy that they're just not going to sit straight without something else holding them back or holding them down even more. If there's any experienced modelers watching, if you can think of a way to proverbially blue pill these guns into being a little bit more erect, any advice greatly appreciated. Please let me know in the comments. Maybe I could like drill down into them, drill up into those and have some kind of dowel or rod sort of holding them in place, make them a bit stiffer. Yeah, so let me know and I'll try and get that all sorted out for the rematch with Steve's Knights. And speaking of which, let's issue that challenge. Hello, Steve.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I'm all good.
I would like to issue you a challenge, a rematch, in fact. Yeah, I feel like in our last game, the Warlord Titan versus the Knights, not only did I roll really bad, I also picked probably the wrong weapons. And now I've given Games Workshop even more money. I now have laser blasters instead of the missiles. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, sure, that sounds great. If you're up for some more punishment, I never get bored of beating it.
Oh, that's fighting talk. Okay, cool. Right, let's make it happen. So that's it then, Gauntlet well and truly laid down. Thanks for joining me on this absolutely stupid video. Now I suppose we just need to wait and see if these new guns actually make a difference, or if I'm just going to be the proud owner of the most expensive Warhammer 40k paperweight in history. Place your bets in the comments, Warlord Titan redemption arc, or just another catastrophic failure. And I'll read through your predictions while I try and figure out how to make these guns a little bit less floppy, because honestly, I don't want to have to whisper, shh, it happens to a lot of Titans every time I field this thing. So yeah, well done Games Workshop. You win. You made the game, you wrote the rules, you ruined the Titans rules, and here I am yet again trying to desperately fix the problem by throwing money at it. I mean, give them props where it's due, right? GW have been doing microtransactions in games decades before EA even thought about it, so get going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.